While most presidents wore suit jackets, ties, and dress pants all the time, you don't have to any longer. Because Presidents Unplugged has merch. If you want to check out some new shirts to buy as a nice gift for somebody in your family or just something that you want yourself, go to presidentsunpluggedmerch.com to check out new shirts, hoodies, crew necks, and anything else that you can dream of. Now in many more colors and new designs coming soon. I'm very excited for the Presidents Unplugged merch store to finally be open. Now, let's get back to the show. When you think about Woodrow Wilson, you have to start with the fact that this president is not like any other. He wasn't just a politician who stumbled into office. He was a scholar. He was the only U.S. president with a PhD. He studied history deeply and believed that history does repeat itself. He genuinely thought that he could guide the country in a way that kept history from repeating itself in the bad ways, but kept it repeating itself in the good ways. But what makes Wilson so fascinating, and honestly so complicated, is that even though history was his passion, he often found himself on the wrong side of it. This is Presidents Unplugged. Let's do this. Wilson grew up in the South during and after the Civil War, in a family that very firmly did not support Abraham Lincoln. But Wilson only saw one Democratic president in his entire lifetime before becoming one himself. And uniquely, he joins John Tyler as one of the only two presidents who were citizens of both the United States and the Confederate States. That Confederate upbringing shaped him. His ideas, his worldview, his instincts, and his blind spots were impressions that never left Wilson. By the time he rose politically, he came across as this reform-minded academic from Princeton University. And honestly, people were drawn to it. He kind of seemed like your average smart guy that would say, actually, teacher, 6 times 7 is 42, not 44. And when it came to the presidency, the 1912 election was one of the most chaotic, dramatic elections ever. We've been talking a lot about elections recently. So what happened in 1912? I've actually covered it in 2 episodes before this. Teddy Roosevelt's episode and William Howard Taft's episode. The 1912 election was William Howard Taft versus Teddy Roosevelt versus Woodrow Wilson. Teddy Roosevelt was a progressive, which leaned more Republican, and Taft was all the way in the Republican Party. But the Democratic Party chose Wilson in a pretty smart move. Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft at the time, even though they were buddies, they really disagreed. They were very loud about their disagreements with each other, and they were pretty much constantly fighting for this entire election. I believe this. Oh no, I believe this. No, I believe this. You should believe what I say. But Woodrow Wilson stayed quiet. He campaigned, but not loudly. Wilson slid right through the middle of this chaotic election with a calm, professional persona. His ideas, they felt fresh. His tone felt civilized. And amidst this giant fight between the Republican Party, basically splitting it, Wilson's ideas were built on good government, honest, efficient, moral government that could uplift the entire country. And through a pretty similar event to the 1992 election, where Ross Perot and George W. Bush split the Republican Party, allowing Clinton to win, Taft and Teddy Roosevelt fought it out and split the Republican Party in half, allowing Wilson to come out on top. And normally we think, oh, they need more than half the vote. No, Wilson barely got 40% of the vote. And that just proves to you that different elections have completely different results. But after becoming the president, early in his presidency, tragedy hit him like a truck, even though the Ford pickup truck wasn't a thing yet. His first wife, Ellen Axon Wilson, passed away in 1914, just over a year into his first term. The loss devastated Wilson. He needed somebody to be with him. It's kind of who he was. He had 3 daughters at the time, and journalists and close friends realized just how emotionally needy that Wilson had become, and how much he really did rely on his wife. And that's part of why he remarried so quickly. Only about a year later, to Edith. He loves the E names. Edith wasn't just a partner. She became his closest advisor, his protector, and later, possibly our first ever female president. I'll get to that later. Wilson pushed forward in his presidency with major domestic reforms, tariff changes, the income tax, and something many people forget, the Federal Reserve. Even though he wasn't really the driving force behind the Federal Reserve, he signed the act into law, and because of that, he ended up appearing on the $100,000 bill, the largest denomination of U.S. currency that we've ever printed, used only for gold transfers between the Federal Reserve banks. It existed for just a few years, but it's a pretty wild fact that Woodrow Wilson's face was on the highest value piece of U.S. currency ever created. And no, that $1 million bill that's made of chocolate that you see in the gas station with the Statue of Liberty on the front, it's not real. While George Washington himself might not have had an Instagram page, Presidents Unplugged does. If you want to see some presidential content and overall updates on the show, come to the Instagram at presidents_unplugged. See you there. But then came World War I, and everything changed. At first, Wilson was determined to keep America neutral. Let's not deal with this war. Why do we need to? He ran again in 1916 for re-election with this slogan: "He kept us out of war." Which is ironic because literally a few months later, he led the nation straight into it. In his defense, it wasn't really his fault, and he didn't just drag America into war for no reason. He was forced to because a couple of German submarines attacked a ship that we call the Lusitania. Was that the only reason we entered World War I? Not really. There was some other drama happening at the time, but that was the main reason. When Wilson finally went before Congress and asked for the declaration of war, he framed this war not out of vengeance, but as a moral mission to make the world safe for democracy. Wilson supervised this war with intense focus. Wilson had a PhD in history and political science. Dude knew what he was doing, and he had a big idea that history repeats itself, and if we can find these patterns, we can create world peace. After the guns went silent, Wilson arrived in Europe not just as a representative of the United States, but practically as a global celebrity. The world was starting to understand that Wilson didn't just take us into war to kill a bunch of Americans. He took us into war for the ultimate goal of peace. People held up their signs, thanking him for saving the nations, and his idea, the League of Nations. International cooperation, lasting world peace. That was a revolutionary idea at the time. You can't overstate just how hopeful the world was when he presented this vision for a new global order. Don't fight. Work together to create and maintain peace. But at home, the vision didn't land the same way. Many Americans felt the Treaty of Versailles, as it would become, punished Germany too harshly. And they feared getting entangled in foreign conflicts again would cause another war. Germany's never a problem in the United States. Here's the issue. The Treaty of Versailles would lead to Germany not being too happy with the United States. Because, in a very shortened form, the Treaty of Versailles blamed Germany almost entirely for the war. Did Germany entirely cause the war? Not really. They did a lot of it, but they didn't do it all. And Germany had a little bit of anger towards the people around them, which would later lead into an Austrian painter become dictator, conquering half of Europe. But that is for another day. But I have to push you the point that Wilson really did push Americans to believe that Germany was at fault for the entire war. And that's pretty much what the Treaty of Versailles was saying. The Americans weren't really ready to say that yet. So Wilson kept telling America, Germany's at fault, the treaty is good, we should pass it immediately. And Wilson refused to compromise with Congress. Back and forth, Germany's at fault. No, they're not. I think they might be. Oh my gosh, World War II's coming. Wait, how do you know that? Time traveler. And in the middle of this political battle, Wilson suffered a stroke in 1919 that left him partially paralyzed and barely able to function. But in moments of trouble, as Bonnie Tyler would say, I need a hero. And Woodrow Wilson's hero was Edith Wilson. Edith Wilson, as I mentioned earlier, can possibly be a mention for the first ever female president, with a little bit of controversy as an appetizer. Edith Wilson took over some roles of her husband's while he was paralyzed. But she didn't just answer some letters or go to some meetings. Oh no, she completely decided what her husband saw, which pretty much decided the stuff that was happening in the executive branch. A woman with power? How dare she? She should be back in the kitchen. Whoa, Ty. When did you become such a misogynist? I can promise you, I'm not. I am imitating the thought of every man in the 1910s. People during this time thought women shouldn't have power. Women should stay in the house. Women shouldn't get out and do things. And they shouldn't be able to vote. But the women had had enough. What we consider today women's suffrage was a bunch of rallies, parades, protests of women holding up signs requesting the ability to vote. Peaceful protests. There's a lot of people in that time who fought with them. Influential women who have defined history. And in one of Wilson's greatest accomplishments as president, he was able to pass the 19th Amendment, which allowed women the right to vote. Good on you, Wilson. Good job using your progressive ideas to get things done. Well done, Wilson. Well done. After leaving office, Wilson did not live much longer, very short time. He just had a few quiet years before passing away in 1924. His achievements were monumental. He pretty much ended World War I for the entire world. It's obviously a debate if it was a good decision or not to blame Germany, and did it possibly lead into World War II? Maybe. But still, very big things that he did. But we have to talk about something. He pushed for this global cooperation. He started the UN, which is a group of countries getting together to fight for one another. He believed deeply in peace and diplomacy, and in many ways, that peaceful vision genuinely shaped the world. Wait, why is he ranked as one of the worst presidents in American history then? And the reason for that isn't his foreign policy or his academic idealism that he got from Princeton. It's his racism. I just love covering this right at the end of the episode because it's not controversial at all. I have not described any president in this entire series as racist. The word racist is used in many different ways today, but we have to understand that it's not a word that should just be thrown around. With Wilson, it's thrown around for very good reason. Was Woodrow Wilson a racist? Yeah, kind of. Did he show off a bunch of racist ideas? Yeah. He screened a movie in the White House that was about the success of the Ku Klux Klan in the South during the Civil War. What? Growing up in the South and growing up during the Confederacy, very sadly, limited his ability to see African Americans as equal citizens. And that damage lasted for decades. Even policies he didn't personally craft reflected the prejudices that he refused to challenge. This is where Wilson becomes one of the most complicated figures in presidential history. You can't say, really, that he was fully heroic or fully villainous. He was both brilliant and deeply flawed. He was a man whose peaceful global vision reshaped international politics and saved millions of lives, yet whose domestic attitudes hurt countless Americans because of the color of their skin. So when people refer to Woodrow Wilson as one of our worst presidents, it's not really because of the League of Nations. It's not because of the war. It's not because of the way he found peace in it all, or the 1912 election. It's because of his failures, particularly regarding civil rights. And sadly, that overshadowed all of his successes for generations. And when people say he was one of the most important presidents, they're right. Because without Wilson, world peace would be a figment of imagination, and it would look completely different. Wilson's legacy is expansive, but it's also really messy. It's inspiring, it's infuriating, and it's impossible to sum up in one sentence. But maybe that's what makes Wilson worth studying. Wilson was not a simple man, but we have to realize that U.S. history is not a simple story. He was capable of extraordinary leadership, but at the same time, extraordinary failure. And understanding both sides of his story is the only way to truly understand who he was, what he did, and why he still matters today. And did Woodrow Wilson win the fight for lasting peace? I guess we'll never know. And that is why Woodrow Wilson is so important. Tune in next Friday as we talk about Wait. Are those jingle bells? Jingle bells, history's on display. Tune in December 19th for a presidential holiday. Hey, season finale, time is here, so don't miss the show. See how presidents shaped Christmas many years ago. That took way too long, but next week is the Christmas season finale. Lots of stuff will be happening, including why do we celebrate Christmas in the first place? How did presidents shape Christmas? And why is it the most wonderful time of the year? This is Presidents Unplugged. I'm Ty Svensson, and I'll see you soon. God bless. We need to make an executive decision now. The executive decision to follow Presidents Unplugged on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today to be notified weekly that your favorite presidential podcast has released new content. Now, let's get back to the show.